All right, there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth workshop for the participatory budgeting process. This, as you know, we're doling out and working through this process to award Proposition 1, Round 2 Integrated Regional Water Management Grant Funding. Proposition 1 was a water bond that was passed by the electorate in November of 2014. And that funding was allocated geographically, and we're the local process for the Santa Ana funding area or the Santa Ana River watershed. Our program is known as One Water, One Watershed. And here's the agenda that I sent out yesterday. We're going to do 6 items here: introductions. I'll do a recap of the last workshop we had. That was a 3rd workshop that took place on August 10th. We'll talk about projects and their ability to move forward. As you know from the last workshop, there's some top projects that were awarded funding. I'll show how we reallocated some of the funding as the scores changed, and we're dealing with the issue of projects able to move forward. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about that in item 4 as well, and go through the scoring, AKA the rating and ranking changes since the August 10th workshop. As we've done, we'll talk about it as a group, get feedback from stakeholders and everyone on the call. I'll lastly point out this nuanced issue that we haven't talked about in our past workshops, which deals with those projects that enter into agreements with SAPA, those successful top projects. Once they enter into agreements with SAPA, they're going to have to differentiate their cost share into 2 different categories. And I'll talk about one of those categories in depth, the required cost share. And then we'll talk about next steps and the need for additional follow-up with the project proponents. This is the 4th workshop, and I think we're almost there. So we're thinking this will be the last workshop, unless there's major concerns on behalf of the project proponents in this workshop. So these are the agenda items. Are there any questions or additions before we move on? All right, well, I'll do introductions here like I normally do by going down the list that I see on Zoom. So we have Rudy Rosas from the city of Santa Ana. We have Bill Schwartz from Monte Vista Water District. Casey McPherson from San Bernardino County Parks Department. Dan Levy, Rick Wetzel from the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority. N. Thomas, do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, this is Nate Thomas.
Nate Thomas, thank you.
From CRW. Yep.
From Cal Rural Water Association, thank you. Jeff Sorensen from County of San Bernardino, I believe.
Correct. I work for Supervisor Hackman.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Elizabeth Jakins, Chris Garcia from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Nicolette Jonkoff from Eastern Municipal Water District, Marie Hodegi from Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, Jason Gu, a consultant for Aruba Community Services District, Haley Moulet from Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, Lisa Morgan Perales from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Mark Norton from Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, Don Ho from the Lake Elsinore Watershed Authority, or LEJWA, Thomas Crawley from City of Rialto, Mona Sadik from San Bernardino County Flood Control District, and Patty from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Melissa Matlock from Municipal Water District, Western Municipal Water District. Sudi, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, this is Sudi Shoja with Engineering Solution Services. We're grant writers for City of Santa Ana.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dylan Dibble from Cal Rural Water Association. Emmeline Gu, also a consultant for Aruba Community Services District. Jennifer Nevis or a consultant for City of Rialto. Savannah Regan, Rebecca Christensen, Andrew McGuire from Orange County Public Works Department, Jonathan Oliver Skinner from City of Lake Elsinore, Tanley Kars-Riddick, Nicole Hemans, Dustin Michael from San Bernardino County Flood Control District, Keith Backus from Parupa Community Services District, Vincent Lopez from Eastern Municipal Water District, Maureen Urbeznik, consultant from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Ashley Womack from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, and also Lisa Munoz from Inland Empire Utilities Agency. Is there anyone I missed? Or I said a couple names there and I didn't give your affiliation. So if you'd like to chime in with your affiliation, now's the time to do so.
Nicole Hemmons with City of Rialto.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Ian, it's Tammy Kerstradok from AECOM.
Great, thank you, Tammy.
And I'm Elizabeth Jackins with the U.S. Geological Survey.
Great, thank you. Looks like we just had Ben Foster join as well. Ben, do you mind introducing your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Ben Foster, a management analyst with the City of Lake Elsinore.
Great, thank you, Ben. Is there anyone else that we missed? All right, well, let's move on to item 2, stop a recap of the August 10th workshop, which was the third workshop we had in this process. As you know, you all submitted projects, or most of you who are on the line, a couple of you are stakeholders, but most of you submitted projects during the call for projects and by the deadline of June 1st. But we're now going through this staff review and participatory budgeting process, and we're looking to wrap that up in time for our September meeting with our governance structure, which is the OWOW Steering Committee and SAPA Commission. They'll meet in September and October, and we'll take to them the highest ranked projects that are developed through consensus through this participatory budgeting process. We'll then work with those top projects to submit an application to the lead state agency for an Integrated Regional Water Management Program, or IRWM. Their deadline is February 2023, so we'll work with those top projects to get all the necessary additional paperwork to submit by February of 2023. Then DWR, the lead agency, will review our proposal and then announce awards in April of 2023. That's our best estimate based on information at this time. And then we have to execute an agreement with those top projects, and also DWR, SAP is the lead agency for the IRWM process for the Santa Ana funding area. So we execute agreement with the lead state agency, and then we execute what we call sub-grantee agreements with each of the top projects that carry down the provisions from that overarching grant agreement. And the timeline to do that is in October of next year, which is after we know that everything was fully funded. So in terms of workshop number 3 recap, so we discussed the project rankings and grant funding formula for the 2 competition pools. As you know, we have 2 competition pools. And we've been gearing up for this in workshop number 1 and number 2. Workshop number 3 was the first time we showed the project ranking and also the grant funding allocation using the grant funding formula for those 2 competition pools. One is DAC implementation or disadvantaged community, and the other is general implementation. We also discussed the need for 2 backup projects, one for the DAC competition pool and one for the general. This is a new item that we haven't done before, but DWR wants us to have a backup project in case during the implementation phase, which will be from 2023, October 2023 to 2027. So during the implementation phase, a project may drop out. They may run into a roadblock, maybe from a permitting regulatory agency or from a funding perspective. So that project will drop out. So we need a backup project. So we will have one for each DAC in general, and that'll be the next project that's just below the others of the top project list, as shown in the project benefits spreadsheet that I sent out. We got a couple comments in the last workshop. One was, we heard this from a number of people, there's no benefit per capita scoring metric in the ranking formula. This was brought up particularly on the DAC implementation competition pool, as they noticed that one of the entities that's a smaller system, the third top ranked project, didn't rank as high because per the ranking formula that we use through this process, there's no benefit per capita scoring metric. Like if your system is this much, these benefits are worth this much to you. You know, there's no per capita equalizer. It's based on, you know, the volume of benefits you're able to provide as we run your benefits through the formula. The group also teed off of that comment and noted that there was 2 outliers in the DAC implementation competition pool that were skewing the funding. So we talked about that and how that's related to the benefit per capita. You know, they just have more volume of benefits, so they were getting a higher score. Now that's the formula that stakeholders in SAPA developed and our governance approved. Now that's what we have at the end of the day to use, and that's why you saw the scores that you did. There was also a question on the greenhouse gas benefit category. We asked project proponents to provide their greenhouse gas reduction benefits, and we got a whole host of different ways to do that. So we normalized those benefits, and we got a question on that, and I went through that during the last workshop. At the close of the workshop, SAPA initiated the question, can your project proceed with the funding awarded? So we, you know, per the spreadsheet that we sent out during workshop number 3 on August 10th, you know, it had, like I mentioned, the grant funding allocation. So we asked at the end of the question for you to think about that and can your project proceed with the funding awarded? And we'll get into that more in the workshop today. Any other comments? Maybe some item that I missed from workshop number 3, or any questions on what was covered in workshop number 3? All right. So we got some questions and comments after workshop number 3, and I tried to capture them all here to be totally transparent. So we got one comment from one of the project proponents about this disadvantaged community area measurement. Looking for a better way to describe it, but hopefully you are all familiar with the concept that DWR and the IRWM program, the SAPA, you know, through our local program here, we ask for you to provide and calculate your disadvantaged community areas. And we define disadvantaged community the way state does, based on median household income within your project benefit area. There's also this other category, maybe a subcategory of disadvantaged community geographic measurement called economically distressed areas, or EDAs, that was highlighted in the DWR PSP. A project proponent asked us to use that, and they said they were looking into using it. This was, you know, after the workshop on August 10th. So we looked into it. We wanted to make sure that we fully vetted using that, and we did. And it's a pretty complicated metric to use. You have to. It's not as simple as using DWR's online tool that they have for determining your DAC areas. You have to use several different methods to pull up these areas. And we've been working with DWR to clarify how to do that. But we've worked with a number of staff over there. We've corresponded with 3 different people at this point. We're still figuring out how to determine EDA. So this may or may not go anywhere. I just wanted to point it out that we had a project proponent ask about an economically distressed areas. We're still looking into it, and we don't have a way of drawing those areas at the moment because DWR still needs to get back to us. Their tool was down, I think, for a couple of weeks, and it was down during our last workshop. So it's a tricky thing to dive into and just simply pull up those geographic economically distressed areas. Any questions on that? Or anyone familiar? If you're familiar with grants and DWR, you may be familiar with this term, but if you've never worked on grants before, you may be wondering what the heck is Ian talking about. But I just wanted to be transparent on that item. Some other changes that we got since the last workshop, one of the project proponents, San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District, edited their benefit area. And as you all recall in workshops 1, 2, and 3, we spent a lot of time talking about benefit areas. They increased their benefit area to include a Hub 12 watershed. That's an additional sub-watershed in the Santa Ana River watershed that was not initially captured. That had a very minor effect on scores by adding that in. And this change did not adjust the top ranked projects, but we included that, and that's reflected in the spreadsheet I had sent out yesterday. Rialto also adjusted their water quality benefit value, which is measured in million gallons per day, or MGD, based on stakeholder comment that we talked about at the last workshop. So we changed that in the project benefit spreadsheet that I sent out yesterday. And this did affect the scores, as their MGD value was and still is the highest. So you'll see that reflected in the spreadsheet I sent out on August 10th, and also the one that I sent out yesterday. It's a changed value. Lejua, that's the Lake Elsinore and San Jacinto Watershed Authority, or Lejua, wanted to ensure their benefit area used to determine their cost share reflected a more narrow benefit area, which was just the benefit area of the lake, because they were seeking to waive their cost share. And if you have a higher DAC percentage, you're able to waive your cost share. So we worked with them and we allowed them to do that, but we didn't change their DAC percentage to change the ranking. We didn't think it was fair to go in that and change the ranking at this time, as we've worked with all the project proponents to set their benefit areas at this time. But it does help them out as they're a top project in waiving some of their cost share. Any questions on these 3 bottom items? They're all project specific. Right. So that was what we talked about on August 10th, and what we talked about with project proponents, and what we worked on behind the scenes after August 10th. Just to reiterate, I've highlighted or alluded to the fact, and if you've attended our past 3 workshops, there's 2 competition pools or disadvantaged community, and that has a set amount. Then there's general implementation, that has a set amount. And then there's 2 subcategories that are geographic based under general implementation that were created in a cooperative funding agreement in 2019 with the North Orange County IRWM group. And they have their own process to fund projects under Prop 1 Round 2, which is led by Orange County Public Works. But as you'll remember, we talked about these 2 geographic carves outs in our last meetings because watershed wide was particularly important, because we only had 1 top watershed wide project. It didn't ask for 2 million here. So we were able to reallocate this watershed amount back to the upper watershed, as well as the Orange County, North Orange County group. We talked about that a bit in our last workshop, so hopefully that's just a refresher for you. I didn't plan on diving too much into that and how that math worked on the watershed wide amount, but that math is still in the spreadsheet that I sent out yesterday. These 2 total amounts total for DAC and general implementation. These 2 competition pools total up to 18.5 million and change. And then to add on to those 2 amounts that total up to 18.5 million, here's your 2 competition pools again. These are the amount of projects we got: 6 for disadvantaged community, 18 for general implementation. Got a little bit of feedback there. If you don't mind muting yourself. You can hear my son talk now. Thanks. So we got 26 projects proposed. We talked about the fact that North Orange County has their own funding, or about 7.1 million. And then we talked about the fact that there is a project in round 1. We're talking about round 2 here today, but there's a second project in round 1 that was not able to move forward. So we're rolling over 2 million on top of this 18 million for round 2. We're rolling over this 2 million into this round 2. And this 2 million will be discussed later in the presentation today. We talked about it in the workshop on August 10th, but we'll be talking about it, how SAPA proposes dealing with some of the issues that we talked about in the last workshop. We'll be talking about this $2 million that will come into play later on. Here is a refresher. We've talked about this, I think, at every workshop, but here's the ranking formula that really drives the scores that we've got. 2 different ranking formulas that have a similar spirit, where your benefit values in the different categories available to you really drive the points you get. And then you have the option to get an increase in your score calculated in the brackets if you answer yes or no to these questions. You get an extra 10% if you're a tribal lead, for example. And we talked about this a lot, especially in the first two workshops, as ensuring that these benefit values and these extra point claims are accurate is very important to making sure that we run the best formula, because we want to make sure we're using values that are truthful and not just claimed. They're backed up by a solid evidence and deliberation by the stakeholders and project proponents. Once projects are calculated, as you all know, hopefully this is a refresher, funding is then allocated through another formula where each project that is a top project gets a share of the money available based on their share of the sum of the other top projects' final scores. So project one would get the most grant available because they have the highest number out of the sum of these top scores. And this is what that formula looks like. You've got your score divided by the sum of all the other top project scores times the dollar of grant available. And that formula gets run again, as we discussed in the last workshop, when some projects don't need their full grant funding. We award through this formula your funding based on your score, but you may get a really high number that is over what you asked for. So we take the difference of what you asked for and what you got awarded, and then we rerun it to make sure the funding is fully allocated. We only had to run this part of the formula for 2 projects because everyone's ask was less than they got awarded. For 2 projects, they got awarded more than they were asked. So we took that difference and reran the formula with those projects who still needed more money. So switching gears, so after the workshop number 3, as I alluded to, projects were asked if they are able to still implement their project with the grant awarded. We ran the benefits formula, we ran the grant allocation formula, and then we showed everyone a dollar value, right? So we asked you, and we asked people to get back to us at workshop number 3, can you move forward with your project with the dollar amount awarded? Everyone said yes. There was one project that said no. That was Box Spring Mutual Water Company Well Improvement Project, which is in the DAC implementation competition pool, not able to move forward due to the low grant allocation. To solve the issue, and as you can see in the spreadsheet that I sent out yesterday, SAPA moved that 2 million rollover amount, and we rolled over 75% of it, or 1.5 million of it, to the Box Springs project. So we rolled it over not to the DAC implementation round, like to all the projects in the DAC implementation round, but we rolled it over to specifically the Box Springs project. But there was 2 million that's rolling over. So the other 500K of the 2 million rollover was allocated to the top general implementation project, to the top suite of general implementation projects using the ranking formula. So everyone else got an up of 500K. So this math is factored into the project benefits spreadsheet that I sent out that has the date on it, 8/24/2022. So further information on, it's just to add on to that, this rollover and this fix here that we included in the allocation. We posed the same question under Prop 1 round 1, but we're dealing with a unique issue here in this round. Under the previous round, where we used the same grant allocation formula and a similar project ranking formula, all projects were able to move forward in that past round with an initial amount due to inquiries by SAPA as the Regional Water Management Group. As I mentioned, we have a unique issue in this round due to the low score with the top third project. As stated prior, we're seeking to fund approximately 10 projects between DAC and the general round. And we asked that question if you're able to move forward under the last round, because we're interested as the Regional Water Management Group in all projects that are the top 10 being able to move forward with the grant provided. And we also want to be responsive to the comments that we received in the last workshop regarding per capita benefits that were really born out of the Box Springs project and our discussion in the last workshop. The Box Springs nitrate water quality project, this well project focuses on nitrate removal as water quality focus. That's consistent with the Prop 1 PSP requirements to include at least one project that tackles nitrate issues. And the OWOW IRWM's plans focus on small water systems. So before I move on to the next slide, I'll just pull up the spreadsheet too to walk you through what the math shows. So you probably can't see anything because this is really small, but I just wanted to show that I'm pulling up the spreadsheet that I sent out yesterday. I'm on the general tab, that's the general implementation projects. We also have a disadvantaged community tab. And now we have a North Orange County IRWM tab as they are wrapping up their projects. So I have projects to add for them. But coming back to the general implementation tab, you've got a number of categories here. I know it's kind of hard to see and I'll zoom in just a second, but you got your projects here. We've got the top projects highlighted in yellow, got the scores highlighted in yellow, and then the funding recommendations that we're recommending today also highlighted in yellow. So I'll zoom in here and hide this so you can see these are all the different benefit categories that I'm hiding that we spent a lot of time in the past, the first two workshops talking about. But here we are talking about the highest ranked scores. And like I mentioned, you see I've got values for the scores in red because like I mentioned earlier, we got that change from Rialto with their MGD water quality value. So they were the highest ranked project. That changed the score slightly for all the projects. So the scores were rerun, but the 7 top projects stayed the 7 top projects. You can also see here, the funding recommendation from 824, which is what we're talking about today, the one we're recommending to move forward with, which is what I sent out yesterday. Then you can also see, I kept this in here to set the context. This is the funding recommendation that everyone reacted to at the last workshop number 10. It's dated 8/10/2022. Sorry, not 2023. And then the difference between those two is here in the delta column. So you can see everyone went down except those projects that were already reached their limit. Those are those 2 projects that got to their cap. And if you sum up all those reductions, they sum up to 1.5 million because in workshop number, we're in the third workshop on 8/10, I included the full 2 million from round 1 being rolled over to the general implementation projects. But to deal with the issues that we've been discussing, and you can see in the math on the DAC round, here's the DAC projects. I'll go ahead and hide all the benefit categories again so I can zoom in. Hopefully that's easier to see. Got your projects here, got the top 3 projects, 7 on the general, 3 on the DAC, so 10 total. You've got that low scoring Box Springs project that we talked about, and that 1.5 million is being added on top of what it got through the ranking formula. So it's not, it's part of that rollover. 1.5 of that 2 million is being rolled over to Box Springs so they can proceed forward. And then the 500K from round 1 of the 2 million is being rolled over, but not rolled over to one project, but rolled over through the formula, ranking formula. So these are the changes here. Box Springs going up by 1.5 and these changes here. And the reasons for that are like I shared in the last 2 slides. So getting back to the PowerPoint, I think I got into this, but feedback, this is to kick off discussion here. Hopefully that my going through that Excel document was helpful so you can fully see the math. That's where this math is driven, that spreadsheet dated 8/24. That version takes into account the Rialto update for their MGD water quality value and the 2 million rollover, which is split out by 1.5 million and 500K. And the question that we could think of to now answer as a group, with these changes, reductions on behalf of the general implementation top projects, and the increase on Box Spring, can your projects still proceed with these updated amounts? We hope they can. We're not talking about decreases of $1 million. They range, I think, from like 290 to 400K. But can your project still proceed with these updated amounts? So something to let us know today, but if you need additional time to get back to us on that, we can set a deadline for you to get back to us on that if you need to internally crunch the numbers before you can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. So that's the question we wanted to tee up, but there may be other questions that we haven't thought of that you all would like to ask. So I'll turn it over to everyone on the phone who wants to kick us off here.
Josh, or
Any questions or any feedback on this question? It's kind of hard to go first, but no pressure. Got 42 people on the call.
This is Ben Foster of the City of Lake Elsinore.
Yeah, I've been.
And we've been meeting internally and can say that we're intending to move forward with the caveat that council approval will be necessary for implementation.
That works for us. Yeah, thank you. Oh, we got some background noise. Sounds like someone's talking on the phone. Thank you. Thank you, Ben, for kicking us off there. Other project proponents, we'd love to hear from you, or if you want more time to think about it, just it'd be nice for you to tell me that now and how long you need.
This is Rialto, Tom Crowley. I'm okay with the presentation and the changes that you had to make. So we're excited to be part of the group that's going to be recommended for funding. So we'll continue to commit to meeting all the requirements of the project. So
great, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Hi, Ian. This is Lisa Munoz from IUA.
Hi, Lisa.
Question. You said that you were going to submit the projects and included are the backup projects. So since we're the number 8 project, is there anything that we need to be on top of? I mean, do we need to submit things along with, the projects that make the list, or do we just kind of sit on the sidelines and wait until we're asked to submit something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't delved into that. I know we got Mark Norden and Marie Hodegi on the phone. Do either Mark or Marie, do you know the answer to that? I'm not sure exactly, but we can look into that for you.
Yeah, that's not really spelled out yet by DWR, so we will be in contact with them to find out how much detail, whether they need a full work plan, budget, and schedule at the same level detail as the actual projects to be funded, or maybe the data that we have is adequate for their needs as a backup project. So we'll have to let you know on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or feedback on project's ability to move forward?
This is Bill from Monte Vista Water District. We are going to push forward and figure out how to move these 2 projects forward that we've received potentially received grant money on.
Great, thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Any other projects going once, going twice? All right, well, our folks that haven't chimed in, are you okay with Friday getting back to us? Or would you like more time than that?
Ian, I'd say for Box Springs that we're going to move forward with the application. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Ian, Friday is okay. We'll send you an email after we discuss with the team.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. All right, well, I'll send out an email after this workshop just so everyone gets it about the Friday deadline for feedback on that question. But is there anything else that the group would like to discuss regarding what we've covered so far in this workshop? Let me see what my next slide is. I think we're switching gears after this. Yeah, we're switching gears to talk about cost share next. So any feedback or questions about this before we move on? All right. Switching gears here, this is an important caveat if you're one of the top projects, particularly if you're a general implementation project, because we've been talking about cost share, and if you're a DAC project or if you have a certain percent of DAC area within your benefit area, you can have your cost share waived. But I wanted to point out the nuance there. This isn't a major issue. Well, it's somewhat major issue, but it's not an issue we have to work out today. This is something we can work out with the top projects going forward. But since we're all together, I wanted to highlight it now, so you're well aware of it when we move to developing a proposal to the steering committee, and the SAPA commission. We'll want to present them a final table in September, and also our application to Department of Water Resources, which we'll work with the top projects on up until the deadline of February. So it's important to point out there are two types of cost share included in a grant agreement with SAPA and the state, the Department of Water Resources. Even though you may see it as just one lump sum, it's cost shares, whatever is not covered by the grant. Your grant plus your cost share is your total cost. But to make it more complicated and fun and exciting, there's two categories. So one is required cost share, which is non-state, has to be non-state funding. And it's the word required is used because overall, in the bond language in Prop 1, each grant agreement or each proposal that SAPA submits has to have 50% local non-state funding match provided. So that's why the word required there. Project proponents may, and the overall proposal may have over 50%. You could have some really big projects there and you could have a lot of cost share in there. So you could go over that 50%. Hence the creation of this other category, other cost share. So there's two categories, required and other or additional cost share. And this is an excerpt from the Prop 1 Round 1 agreement with SAPA and project proponents. You've got 3 projects here. You can see they've got their grant amount and they've got their cost share split into those categories. And one has a nice clean 50%, which 50% is in the spirit of the overall total that we're looking for. One has 61%, so it's pretty high. It's over that 50%. One has 0. So you can start to see the pattern here that overall we need to hit 50%, but there's this balancing going on. Some are 0, some are 50, some are over 50, maybe some are between 0 and 50. And that percentage is the required cost share out of the total cost. So it's not the 2 cost share items out of the total cost, it's the required cost share. That's the number that the state cares about because that's that 50% overall is the number that is written into Proposition 1. So to tee up this issue that'll be worked out with the top projects over the next couple of weeks, this is a table that shows the top projects in the general implementation category. You've got your project names, your applicants. You've got the DAC percentages that we've worked with you on, the grant requests, and your total costs. And then we've got this category here that is in red, and it's your required cost share that's calculated using what your DAC percentage is. And your DAC percentage is your benefits areas percentage. The area within your benefit area, what percentage of it is disadvantaged? So for this project, as a benefit area of the watershed, so 40% is disadvantaged. So with that, we, as you recall from submitting your application, this table was included. So if you have a certain disadvantaged community amount, you can get your cost share reduced or waived based on these tables. So if 75 to 100% of your benefit area, or whatever number is in this column, is 0%, you can have your cost share totally waived. Your required cost share is 0%. You can still have cost share. I'm not saying you can't spend money, but your required cost share is 0, and your total or your additional cost share can be whatever number you want it to be. And the numbers change, as the smaller percentage of your DAC goes, the more cost share you're required. So these thresholds are really created. We look at these numbers. This is what we've been doing. We've been looking at these numbers. You all wanted to reduce your cost share. You're all trying to get aggressive DAC numbers because it helps you in the scoring formula, and it helps you when it comes to cost share. But we want to point out that we've got to work with you on that going forward, because now that we know the top projects, we calculated, we took these values, we used this table, determine what your required cost share is, and we looked at it. And this, if we use these numbers and multiply these numbers by total costs, the required cost share overall for our proposal, including the DAC projects, comes out to 18%, which is a lot lower than 50%. So the solution is we need to take money from your additional cost share and move it to the required cost share column. Some of you will be easily able to do this because you have a lot of additional cost share. Some of you may not have any because maybe your grant project is fully funded, but your project is fully funded by the grant, or maybe your cost share is all state costs. Maybe it's the other costs that the grant's not pitching in for are your or SRF loan, which is a state cost. So something that we need to work out, and we'll dive into, how, and there's some percentages that I added on here that are your, what percent of your total costs are covered by the grant. So for the SOPR project, they've already got 50% is covered by the grant, so they can't pitch in more than that in terms of cost share. So we've got to play around with these numbers, even though we'd love to waive everyone's required, or we'd like to reduce everyone's required cost share and lower them to the values that are in red. That's just not going to be possible with the overall 50% that we have to meet, because if we use these values, we're getting 18% overall. So for those who have just money in, we're not going to ask you if you don't have any additional cost share, but if you have additional cost share, we're going to ask you to move it in this column. You may be wondering, like, what does that matter? It's just a different column. Well, in required cost share, it's something you report to the state. You have to do a little bit more paperwork. You have to include, every time you invoice, you invoice grant and you invoice your required cost share, or whatever amount is included in this column. You don't report this during implementation of a project until the project is fully done. So it's a little bit more paperwork, but for some projects it's not, because they're already tracking all their cost share anyway. So it's not much of a leg lift. For some, it's a little bit more of a leg lift, like especially for federal projects dealing with like the US Forest Service. It's a big lift for them because they're just not used to reporting grants this way. But for most water agencies that we work with, it's not too big of a lift. But I wanted to point that out because we'll work with you on changing your required cost share. And it's something that we wanted to make you aware of. Any questions on that before we move on? Hopefully I didn't put everyone to sleep with grant administration. All right. So next steps, we are looking to move forward with these top projects, and we'll work with them, as I mentioned, to determine the required cost share. But these are the top projects that we're looking to move forward with. We don't plan on holding another workshop. I'll email the group after this workshop and ask everyone to get back to me with comments by Friday. If we get major earth-shattering comments, we'll bring it back to the group via email. Less likely we'd have another workshop to deal with additional comments that we get. But if we do get additional comments, I'll, in the spirit of transparency, I'll make everyone aware with them. We're really going forward after Friday. I think we'll be able to move forward with these top projects that we have, that we showed you here today, and that we've got in the spreadsheet, as well as 2 backup projects. And we need to get back to IUA and the backup project in the DAC category on what that process looks like. So those are our next steps. Like I said, I'll send out an email after this asking for the top projects to get back to me on the particular question, but also any other additional comments. Maybe someone wasn't here today that wanted to voice a comment. All right, any questions or feedback on this?
So Ian, are we at a stage where we could suggest that someone make a recommendation of the projects to be funded, subject to any comments that might be showstoppers by Friday?
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying. Yeah, you said it a lot better than me, but yeah, that's what we're looking at doing. So pending any comments, this is what we'll move forward with.
Maybe we can get some type of formal yay or nay vote.
Sure, yeah. One way to do it on Zoom calls is if there are any opposed, please raise your hand or say or unmute yourself. It's kind of hard to get a yay vote from a bunch of people on Zoom, but is there anyone opposed? I'll ask that. Please raise your hand or voice your comment. Don't see any raised hands. Going once, going twice. All right, well, pending comments by Friday, we'll move forward with these top projects. If there's no further comments, we can wrap up the workshop today. That was the last slide I had. I'll send out the email by after this workshop, and we'll move forward after Friday. So this may be the last time I see the group here. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. If we don't talk on the phone at some point soon. So I really appreciate everyone's time. I know this process, it takes a lot of time. Hopefully it was a benefit to have these meetings virtually. You didn't have to drive to SAPA, but I know everyone worked really hard on their grant application, and they sent us a lot of strong projects with a lot of good information. Hopefully you got a benefit out of this, even if you weren't awarded. It'll help your project long term, maybe strengthen it as this process help you to look at other avenues to strengthen your project. But we really appreciate your time and your commitment to the OL process. We couldn't do it without your projects and without your input.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ian.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.